Welcome back, guys. Chris here, and in this video, I'm going to be doing an independent review of Kolleno. Now, if you're not already familiar with Kolleno, they are a third-party app developer. They make a few different products, but in particular for this video, I'm going to be focusing on their accounts receivable automation tool, which is their main product. Now, when you're talking about the subject of accounts receivable, first off, there is an obvious point, which is that NetSuite does have a native dunning tool. I will reference that a little bit throughout this video, but I think it's best to talk about AR specifically in comparison to the flip side of the coin, which is accounts payable. If you're looking for an accounts payable app, there are so many different options. It can be difficult to navigate and decide which one is the best option for you. And in many cases, it really depends on your circumstances, which app you want to go with. But when you're looking at the accounts receivable side of things, there are really only a handful of different competing products. And in my personal dealings with these products and just the functionality of accounts receivable in general, I've found that Kolleno is really the best choice overall if you're looking for a more sophisticated, comprehensive option for accounts receivable. So recently, I've been having more clients and customers reach out to me asking me questions about the subject of accounts receivable. Instead of doing a full video on that and a review video, I figured I might as well just combine these two things together and talk about accounts receivable in general and specifically why I think Kolleno is the best option. So why would you want to go with a third-party AR app in the first place? There's many different reasons, but three stand out in particular. First off, and most obviously, you want to get paid on time. Secondly, if you want to have real-time visibility into your receivables. And then thirdly, if you want to digitize and automate your collections process. Now, this channel is obviously predominantly for NetSuite, but I should make particular comment on the fact that Kolleno, while it does integrate in very well with NetSuite, it is able to be used with several other options. For example, if you're using Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, SAP, Sage Intacct, Xero, QuickBooks, all of these different options can be integrated in with Kolleno, including, and more recently, they've been doing integrations with Salesforce, which is a major plus point for certain clients that have that NetSuite Salesforce setup. I should also make particular note of the fact that while some products only have a one-way flow where, let's say, NetSuite will feed information as a source of truth over to the third-party app, Kolleno is a two-way flow. So not only is NetSuite going to provide information into Kolleno, but based on the things, the payments, the updates, records, etc., that are happening in Kolleno, that will feed back into NetSuite and will actually create new records, update records, etc., in your main system. So that is a major thing to be aware of and a major plus point of using a product like Kolleno. So with all that in mind, let's actually take a look at the software itself. All right, so here we are in the home dashboard for Kolleno. So when you log in for the first time, this is exactly what you would see. Obviously, we've got a lot of different reporting metrics and things right up front, but I'm not going to be going through this dashboard until later on in the video. So the first thing I actually want to talk about is the most important thing and the most important aspect of getting an AR automation tool, which is the automation element itself. That's really when you're looking at workflows. So let's actually go to those. We're going to come down here to automation. And you can see the first tab we have selected here is workflows. And really what we're looking at here is a bunch of different workflows currently in this account. Now, I am in a demo account, so these are just mock workflows that were created for the sake of this. So when you look over on the right here, notice these are all zeros because there's not actually information processing through this system. But this will give you a proper representation of what the capabilities of Kolleno are. So first off, let's open up a workflow I've already created here. Now, this is a very basic workflow. This is if a new invoice is created, what is the automation that gets created as a result of that? So I'm going to click on this workflow and it brings us to this page. Let me explain what we're seeing here. And I know it's going to be a little bit small on your screen. Unfortunately, I'm on a laptop, so everything's crunched down pretty hard. When you have it on a normal desktop screen, especially if it's larger, you can zoom into these things. You can blow them up so they're much more easily viewed and navigated through. But in simplicity, what we're dealing with is on the left here is our actual workspace where we can create the workflow. And then on the right, we can see basically a blown out view of whatever task or function we are currently selecting. So in this case, what we're looking at here, And again, I know it's a little bit faint on the screen. So you can see at the top here, there's a node for invoice creation. So that's what's triggering this workflow in the first place. And we can see on the right here, what are the actual specific conditions, not just that an invoice gets created, but all these specific conditions need to be met for this workflow to go into effect. So if these things are met, then what happens is it flows down from the invoice creation to an email. And what we can see here is we can come to this email node and we can say, all right, we want to tie this email to a specific template. I'll show you how to create templates a little bit later, but we've got all of the templates we've pre-created on the left here. And these, you can see we've got a number of different ones here. We can select whatever template we want for this particular workflow. And you can see the way these templates work is you have the basic information and use dynamic fields to fill in things like the invoice number, the customer overdue balance, etc. Whatever's the relevant information that you want to provide on this template email, you can put it in here and then link it into this workflow. So basically what's happening here is an invoice creation sets off the workflow. It then triggers an email to be sent based on a template. And then going down even further from that, we have a second email that gets sent out if the first email was not effective. So you can see up here on the right, notice this is showing what template this is linked to. So the first email is using the new invoice created template, and the second follow-up email is using email reminder number 2. Obviously that template's going to look a little different. It's going to trigger things in a different way. This is a perfect example of a very simple workflow. And if you want to add to this thing, it's as easy as coming down here. I can add an additional node, and you can see I have all these different options that I can build into this workflow. So let's describe some of them. We've got the ability to set up an if-else branch, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second, but you can start splitting things off into multiple scenarios depending on the circumstances. We can also add a time delay if you want 3 days to pass before another email goes out. We can dictate what kind of communication goes out. Is it an email? It also can utilize text messages if it's necessary. And you have a bunch of additional record management type tasks that you can do. You can add a tag to, let's say, the customer. You can then, if certain conditions are met, you can label that customer as a high priority or way overdue. You can assign this particular overdue invoice to one of your specific accounts receivable representatives. You could create a task so that if certain things have happened, that accounts receivable clerk will then have a task listed on their dashboard so they know they need to call that client and follow up on the payment. And even down here, we have the ability to update records in the ERP system. So like I mentioned earlier, it's a two-way flow. If we want, based on things that are occurring here in Kolleno, we want to actually start updating and providing information to records that exist on the ERP side, in this case, NetSuite, like updating the customer information, etc. We can do it right here in the workflow. So all of this is no code. It's very basic. It doesn't require an IT professional to execute these things. Anybody with about 5 to 10 minutes working around in this workspace can get a concept of exactly what they need to do to build out a custom and dynamic workflow to match their requirements. I should also point out that if you compare this to NetSuite's native dunning tool, that dunning tool utilizes NetSuite's native workflow capabilities to be able to set up automations. So if you want to set up something that's even somewhat comparable as an automation, you need to be very familiar with how to create workflows in NetSuite. Now, if you've watched my videos on how to learn how to do NetSuite workflows, etc., you probably already know that the workflow tool in NetSuite is definitely pretty sophisticated. It requires a high degree of knowledge to be able to properly navigate and execute things appropriately. This is completely different. This is where someone with no prior experience, as long as you understand what you're trying to accomplish, you can come in here and very easily create some very elaborate workflows. And let me show you an example of that now. I'm going to back out of this particular workflow. And I'm going to come over here. Right here, I have a workflow for overdue invoices, anywhere from 1 to 30 days overdue. So let's open this one up. And this is going to give you a perfect example of a much more complex, elaborate workflow. And I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit on this. I don't expect you to actually be able to read anything that's going on here, but you can see how elaborate this thing gets. You can see the flow is coming down here, and it's pretty faint here, but there's a little split off that occurs right here, and it goes into a totally different set of circumstances based on the criteria. So it might split off and come down this chain. It might follow down here. Again, creating tags, creating records in the system, sending emails, text messages, etc., assigning things to various reps. It then gets split off again, more goes down here, etc. And always down on the right here, you see an overview of the entire workflow. So as you can see, this thing is pretty in-depth, and this is by no means the limit to how in-depth you can make these things. You can really go buck wild on whatever fits your exact requirements. So I'm going to zoom back in on this just so we can continue. So now that you get a concept of the capability of the workflows, let's back out of this for a second. And I should also comment, as I mentioned earlier, we do have templates. So this is where you can create not just email, but also text templates. You can see if I go here to create a new one, you have the ability to create either or, and you can set them up as elaborately as you want to fulfill as many requirements as you think your customers might run into. So with that in mind, let's come out of here. Now, there's a few additional options you have here, but I'm not going to cover every single capability that this software has. I'm trying to cover the broad strokes and some of the more important features. So workflows, absolutely essential. Templates, you're going to see those used frequently. Now let's come to really what I consider the home base for your accounts receivable clerks. This is where they're going to live and operate on a day-to-day basis, and that is up here under collector tasks. So if I click on that, it brings us to this page. So what we're seeing here is on the left, we can see the invoices individually that are overdue, or at least due. And it breaks it down with key information. You can see for each one, we can see the customer that it's related to. We can see the basic communication type, whether by text message or by email, the due date. We can see the net balance. We can also see, because it's particularly relevant, if we have an invoice that's tied to a customer, sometimes we want to see, does this one customer have a lot of overdue invoices? So we can see here, Castle View Hotels doesn't just have one invoice that we're seeing up front, but there's actually two tied to that. So you can see one here for Castle Hotels and a different one here. And then over here on the right, we can see a brief description of what's happening with this invoice, as well as who this invoice is tied to. So if you've got 5 different AR clerks, you can assign this to a particular person. Like this one is assigned to Alex Williams. This one is unassigned. I can easily come in here and say that I want that particular one to be assigned to Linda Davies because I know that she handles a certain geographic zone, etc. You can also do those assignations using the workflow. Remember, it has that capability to just note what's occurring with the client and then refer them to a particular AR clerk. So with that in mind, let's open up one of these invoices and show some of the capabilities that we have here. So I'll click on this ARC Security. And what it does is it pulls out this additional window pane, giving us a split screen of both what's happening with the client as well as what should we do next. So here we see the timeline. Starting at the top is the most recent. We can see all the various, not just communication, but also the relevant interactions that we've had with this client. So you can see we had an inbound text message from the client. We can see what they stated. We also had an inbound email. Down from that, we had outbound emails. You can also, there's little tags that get applied. So we can see, was this outbound email an automated email or was it something that was manually created? We can see, was that email even read? That's obviously an important one. You want to make sure that things aren't just hitting the spam box, but are getting received by the clients in the first place. So scrolling down from that, we've got lots of different information here. And in particular, they also record things like payments received, which is so important because you not only want to be able to see the various communication going back and forth, but also instances where the client has in fact paid. So you can acknowledge them for things like that and follow up on any outstanding balance. So that's the timeline. Then over here on the right, we have an automated setup of what should be our next communication. So in this particular case, the software has recommended that the next thing we should send out should be an email, and it just automatically fills in who we're sending the email to. We have that contact info for that client specifically saved in here, and it pulls in our email address. I want to make a particular note of this because unlike some of the competing products where the outbound email, in other words, what does it look like to the client in terms of who's emailing them, instead of just being a dunning email that is kind of an auto-generated thing, Kolleno has the capability to make it so that when the clients receive these emails, it shows as coming directly from whoever it is you want the email to come from. If it's your AR clerk, Joe Clark, you can have his email there. Even if it's an automated email, it will show it as coming from him. Down from that, it fills in some basic information. Now we could write a custom email if we feel like it, but more often than not, you're going to want to come in here and choose from your already created templates. It will, again, use those dynamic fields to automatically pull in the necessary information. And even from that, we can come in here and we can do an automatic AI generated response. So we can click on this. It looks at the timeline of communication, what's outstanding, and automatically pulls in all this information to propose what should be our next communication to this client in particular. So you can see here, it knows the contact information, it knows what's recently occurred, and it proposes this email. Now we could simply insert this, or we could take it, make little edits as necessary, and then use that to send an email out. So everything's really coming together to make this as efficient as a process for your accounts receivable department as possible. So that's the right side of things. We also have the ability on the left side. I showed you the timeline, but we can also look at things not just from a timeline perspective, but also from an invoice perspective. So we can see all the invoices this client has had with our company, as well as the ones they've already paid and the ones that are currently outstanding. So we're going to now close this window. We get a concept of what we could do on an invoice by invoice basis. I should also point out here that we have some basic filters here at the top. So if we want to look at everything as opposed to just those invoices that are overdue, and if we want to get even more sophisticated with our filtering, we can come down here and we can add a whole host of additional filters, like limiting it down to specific accounts receivable clerks or customers, certain price ranges, etc., whatever we want to do with that. Now, this, again, is kind of like the home base for the AR clerks, but you also have the ability not to look at things from an invoice side, but from a customer side. So you can do that by coming over here to the Customers tab. If I click on that, you can see it pulls up a very similar looking list, but in this case, we're looking at specifically just the customers along with all the relevant information by customer. So you can see the net balance, how much is due from them, as well as overdue, how many open invoices they have, and then most importantly, you can see there is a rating system, so somewhat of an arbitrary rating assignation like A, B, C, etc. But over here, you can see we have the last date action. And that is particularly important because we want to make sure that we've set up our automated workflows and our templates so that there is never a customer that has an overdue balance that hasn't been reached out to very recently. So you should be able to go through this list. Like for example, down here, we've got the last action came out in February. That was months ago. We don't want a single overdue invoice to go months without some sort of follow-up. So this is where we could see, why hasn't this client been followed up on? What workflows do we need to modify or even create to make sure that we're capturing this particular customer? We also have the ability, if I come down here and click on a particular customer, we get a bit of a dashboard view of them, similar to what we were looking about on the invoice side, but now it's particular for this customer. We can see outbound email, inbound emails, etc., text messages. We've got this whole timeline on the left. We also get sort of a snapshot view on the right, so we can see just overall information, what's due, what's overdue, etc. And this tool in particular, I found nifty. It's not do or die, but it's something you won't see with a lot of other competitors. They managed to tie in a AI tool. I believe they're using ChatGPT. And if you click on ask a question, what you can do is you can simply type out whatever your question is in relation to this customer. So let's say I wanted to get a summary of what's going on with this customer. So I say summarize this account. I can type that in, hit enter, and automatically it generates, using AI, a quick summary of information and relevant notes for this particular customer. So let's take a look at what it came up with. We can see that there's been payment delays. We can see that it looks like our contact from this customer, Naisa, they've had a dispute on one of the invoices. So instead of having to dig through the timeline to try to get some assumptions and information on what's happening, you can get the AI to do a lot of the legwork for you. Again, a lot of what you're getting out of this app is it's making things more efficient in the way that you're handling your accounts receivable. So that is a great feature you can take advantage of. Now, there's a lot of other things we're seeing here. Again, I'm not going to comment on everything. We've got invoice views, credit note views, etc. I do want to point out we have a configuration option here. This is where you can come in on a customer by customer basis and set these things up. So we can come in here, we could add additional customer contacts, we can modify or take note of the payments that they use. We can also set credit limits, etc. And if you are using a Salesforce integration, you can come over here and you will see the sales information being pulled from Salesforce populated down here under sales data. So a lot of different things you can really influence in relation to this particular customer, but most notable is how does the customer interact with us as a client that's using Kolleno? What is the customer's interaction with us? And the way that you can see that is coming up here to the customer portal. So I'm going to open this up. And this is what you're going to allow your customers to access and interact with to be able to pay you back if they're using Kolleno. So in this case, if the customer logged on, they'd be able to see all the various invoices they have outstanding with, let's say, us as a company. And you can see the customer is going to be able to see the amounts, the dates, how many days late, what is the status for that. They can easily come over here on the right and pay any of these invoices as needed using credit card, bank transfers, ACH, whatever requirement they have. These things are all set up using Stripe, etc. Kolleno is linked in with the major banks internationally, so many different options for payments listed out here. And there's a few additional options here. One in particular I thought was interesting is if the customer has credit notes or credit memos outstanding with you, they have the ability to come in their own portal here and apply credits to payments that they have outstanding. So it gives the customer quite a bit of flexibility. That is something you can choose to give as an option for the customer. If you personally, the way your business is set up, you don't want the customers just willy-nilly putting credit memos in different places, you can customize this so it's not shown as an option. You can really limit down what the customer has the capability to do. And over here on the right, the customer can see the payments that they've made, as well as add or review the payment options they currently have. So this is a great and a very clean portal that your customers can utilize when giving you payments. And of course, if they pay through this, it's automatically not only linking in the Kolleno system, but it can push that information back into NetSuite, so everything is up to date. I should make a particular note of the fact that the connection process between NetSuite and Kolleno occurs every 1 to 3 minutes. So at all times, things are going to be very up to date on what's happening with your receivables. There's not going to be a 30-minute, or in some cases, you can even have a multi-days lag using some of the other products. Kolleno is going to be up to date with that 1 to 3 minute time window. So that is the customer portal. I'll close that. We've now discussed a lot of the key features you have available on Kolleno. So let's go back now to our dashboard, because there's a few different things that you can take advantage right here on the dashboard. So the first thing that we see is, obviously we've got a very cool chart here that shows us the breakdown of customers and invoices in relation to not contacted, contacted, and promised to pay. The entire objective that we would have by using software like Kolleno is we want to get this orange column down to 0. We want to reduce it so that no one is not being followed up on. Now, with a chart like this, it's very dynamic. You have the ability to click on any one of these bars and it will pull up the exact transactions related to that bar that you're seeing. So if you're wondering, why is that figure so high? You can pull it up, and right here in a snapshot view, you can start to get a better concept of what is occurring with these invoices, why are they in this particular category, etc. So a lot of great information here. Obviously, we've got all kinds of metrics up above and below. We want to get this collected amount as high as possible and the invoices paid on time as close to 100% as possible. But moving down from that, we have a number of additional features and analytics we can take advantage of. In particular, we've got this top 10 debtors. So this is a listing. And of course, over on the right here, this is, again, the most important thing we want to be taking a look at. Now, this is a demo account, so we can see this as no contact. But really what we would want to see here is we would want to see for every single one of these customers, we want to make sure that that last contact point was as recent a date as possible. Anyone that's lagging behind, we should be asking ourselves, why is that occurring? And what workflow do we need to create to make sure that they are getting routinely followed up on for their payments? Down from that, 2 additional things I wanted to comment on. First off, we have this customers balance not in Dunning workflows. You can see we've got 82% here. So 82% of our customer balances are not being captured by a workflow right now. We want to get that percentage down to 0. So everything's being picked up. And further down from that, we have this automated email performance. So this is another feature you don't see often with these types of AR apps. This is something you won't always see with the other competitors. This is where we can see what percentage of the emails being sent out, especially those that are being sent out on automation, are actually making it to the client. So in this case, we can see 67% are being received and are actually read, but 33% are not. So we could actually dig into that figure and find out which ones aren't being read. Maybe it's because it's coming from a wrong email address. Maybe the workflow isn't properly set up or it's not optimized. Our headlines are not attention grabbing enough that the customers are opening these things up. All of this information is useful to try to figure out what is the best way to set up your accounts receivable to get the highest percentage of collections possible. So these metrics really just give you every piece of information possible to make your system more effective and, as I've said many times now, more efficient. So that's your dashboard. Couple last points I want to comment on here. First off, configuration wise, if we come up here, I'm going to come down here to settings. So it brings us to this page. There's a lot of different things you can put in terms of information, but in particular, I want to talk about the accounting. This is where you can come in and you can connect and you can set up. I know it's squeezed in a page here because I'm on a laptop view, but it's showing all the different ERP options such as Business Central, NetSuite, etc. And this is where you can come in. Let's say you're using NetSuite. All you have to do is click the connect button. It logs you to the login portal for NetSuite. You log in, suddenly you're connecting these things up. It takes about 5 minutes to do, and you've got your Kolleno setup now integrated in with NetSuite. It can be done very, very rapidly, although I should note the full integration in terms of custom fields, proper mapping, all of that will require the actual Kolleno integration team, and you should generally expect that to take roughly 30 days. It can be done sooner, but that was the time frame I would keep in mind in terms of how you expect that to be fully set up and configured. And I should make note of the fact that Kolleno uses all in-house technology. So they're not also relying on some other app or piece of software. So the onboarding process is very simple because everything can just be shown using Kolleno. You don't have to then jump off onto some other piece of technology. You don't need to rely on anyone else for IT, anything like that. And the last thing I want to show you is over here under reconciliation. If we come to this, now, first off, I should point out that Kolleno, as a separate product that they are developing a full-on bank reconciliation app. So that will be coming out in the near future. That will have a full capability for bank reconciliations. This piece of the AR automation app is specifically in relation to reconciliation for your accounts receivable. So the way this works is we've got our various accounts here, and we could even add an additional bank account as needed. It's as easy as coming in here. You can see all of the various accounts that are related. You can do a search by country, etc. So if we want to come in and select some random obscure bank, it's very simple. You can connect these things up. And once you have your banks connected, then you have the ability to come in. Let's open up one of these. And what we can see here is we can see all the various transactions in relation to this bank. So these two things are linked, and we can easily do a reconciliation process and push that information back to NetSuite, which is incredibly important when we're going through this. So for example, you can see we've got on the side here, we have the reconciliation status. So for example, if we just take this one at random, so this one's for 118,000, you can see it's unreconciled. All we have to do is come over here to match. It pulls up this additional page and it provides, again, it's looking at the system and it's going, okay, good. We think we have a 60% match with a particular transaction we can see on the other side. So this is what's recommending to do that reconciliation. And we can look at it, review, make sure that the 60% is correct. It is in fact the right one. We can select it. And if I scroll over here on the right, you can see, again, this transaction is for 118,000. We could reconcile a piece of it if it was only a partial reconciliation, or if it's for the full amount, we could easily come in here. We could say, all right, it's for the full amount, 118,250.37, and go confirm match. And right there, transaction successfully updated. So we've now reconciled that particular thing. You can see it is now reconciled. And if we now back out of this transaction, we'll say save and continue. And just like that, you can see we can come down to this previously unreconciled transaction for 118,000, and it is now reconciled. All right, so that's your overview look at Kolleno As I've said before, when it comes to the AR automation ecosystem for third-party apps, there's really only a few options. So you can look at other ones like SideTrade, Esker, HighRadius, but in my personal opinion, and having worked with some of these other products, none of them have all of the different capabilities and features that you find for something like Kolleno. So if it is something that you're interested in and want to check out further, by all means, I do have a link for it down below. If you found this video helpful in particular, please hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and with that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.